Good evening. Welcome to the Ward 3 NPA here at the Sharon Busher Conference Room of City Hall. We'll be commencing the meeting at 6:34 p.m. Our first order of business is the CDBG Grant Advisory Board updates. We have Brooks Cummings, our Ward 3 representative, to be discussing the matter for about 10 minutes or so.
Okay.
Yes.
Sounds good. You're gonna keep me on track.
Yes.
So I did a little research over the last couple of days because there's an orientation that's occurring this month, and then my first meeting will be March 5th. So trying to bring myself up to speed. CDBG is Community Development Board grant. So my understanding from the literature is that the federal government allocates a certain amount of money to the city. And then people can apply, I think typically in February or March, organizations, I say people, but organizations can apply for a grant. And then we, as a governing body, determine the allocation of the grant to the requesters. So in looking at the 2025 list, there were about 14 requesters, and there is some allocation requirements from the federal government, which I don't understand, but I will after I get orientated. So out of the 14 organizations that requested, my basic math would say there was about little over $500,000 allocated, or at least recommended awarded. So I don't know if those have been actually awarded, because at the bottom of the memo, it says, I think it's a mayor and city council allocation. So I'm pretty close. I don't know if that was on the determinative agenda or the other agenda, but I'm a pretty avid watcher of the city council, and I don't remember. Oh, but what's the first agenda? Consent agenda.
That's what I think now. Yeah, that's just, so.
Sorry.
It hasn't happened yet. You all do an advisory set of recommendations and then council and mayor takes that.
Gotcha. Yeah, gotcha. So thank you. So it seems like the recommendations are still outstanding. And I look forward to getting I have not seen the new 2026 list of applicants. But hopefully we'll get that before March 5th, so I can reflect a little bit on what I would think the allocations could be. And I'm really looking forward to bringing it forward to the folks in this room to hopefully we'll have enough time to discuss the recommendations, or at least the applications, to see what your view is on the recommendations. So I'm sorry I'm not more educated in this part of the city machine, but that's what I have today.
Yes. So it's your first time doing this, and we have the applications from the last cycle, or ones that are currently pending up there, and on the city website, and folks can look at that, find the link, and then
yeah, and I don't quite, as I said, I don't understand the delineation between public service projects, which are up to 15% of the city's allocation, and then the non-CEDO application. Anyways, so there is some delineation on how the funds can be spent.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Brooks. Yeah, how long you well under time, so.
All right, I'd be happy to take questions, but I won't be able to answer them because I'm going to go through the education. So.
All in due time. All right. Moving on to our next agenda item, we have a city budget presentation with our very own Mayor Emma Mulvaney-Stanek. And is Catherine zooming in?
It's just me.
Just you tonight? All right.
Well, me for this item, and then my director of REIB, Kelly Perkins. We have a little road show, so we're ready to use our time.
Oh, yeah.
We're ready.
Well, means, and yeah, we're a pretty good chunk, so take it away.
Great, wonderful. Well, hello, everyone. Always great to be back in my hometown, my home Ward 3, NPA, and glad to see you all. I have a handout that I'll pass around, which has 2 QR codes It lists all 4 ballot items that will be on your ballots that should come in about 2 weeks' time or so, because we do mail ballots to every registered voter in the city of Burlington. So it should be in your mailboxes in and around Valentine's Day. If it doesn't arrive, always please do call the clerk's office pretty quickly so we can make sure we get you a ballot. You can always register and still vote the day of the election, even if a ballot is not there, and or you have to update your voter registration. But on this sheet, we're going to talk to 2 of the municipal side of the questions, which are related to the tax rate increase, which is attached to our fiscal year 27 budget, as well as the REIB charter change questions. The school budget, of course, is always question 1. And the 4th item is around the school commissioners receiving a stipend this year. Those are 2 items we're not going to address tonight because school commissioners are usually out talking about those items at NPAs. So with that, I'm going to walk you through the general fund budget early estimations, as well as the making, hopefully, the case and education around the police and fire tax, which will be on your ballots. So first of all, it's been pretty widely reported. We estimate that this upcoming budget year, which starts July 1st, is estimated to have another structural budget gap, which I'll explain a little bit about why we continue to have this in a minute. But the estimate for next year is between $10 to $12 million for our general fund budget. That's approximately 10% of our $107 million budget. We have enterprise funds this does not include. So Burlington Electric Department, our airport, our water utility, and our parking services and Churchy Marketplace all are not part of this budget, but it's basically everything else, all the other operating expenses we have as a city. This is how we built it basically, is that was on a few assumptions to get that estimate initially is, of course, look at personnel, and our personnel estimates are about $78 million. I'm not going to read every single line for all of you, but these are in line with our expectations in terms of the projections of the general cost of increase related to our insurance and workers' comp. If you want to go to the next slide. So we started with what was in our current fiscal year in terms of personnel expenses. It also reflects 2 new contracts we have with 2 of our 4 unions who represent staff here in the city. That includes our police and fire, which we settled contracts with last year for this current fiscal year. It's a 3-year contract for each. In the fire contract, BFFA represents the Burlington Firefighters Association. In that contract, we did agree to adding 2 new firefighters positions for safe staffing. There was a report that was made to the city before I became mayor, and this is making sure that we fulfill that commitment of making sure we have safe staffing for this part of our first responders. It also represents in the personnel assumptions the cost of living that related to our police and firefighters, our police officers. That is, there's other professional staff there, but this is specific to police officers. You can see where those cost of living increases are. That is comparable to area increases for cost of living for police and fire. And again, the council unanimously supported these contracts. We start bargaining with the other large union here. AFSCME represents the rest of our city staff, essentially. And so we have, we've done some conservative budgeting for that, but that budgeting commences in March. So we don't know those numbers quite yet. And non-union usually tracks what AFSCME settles around. Moving on. Thank you, Barbara. Next slide. The next piece, of course, is that there are annual step increases eligible for staff based on their longevity with the city. That's incorporated in here. The next one is the biggest driver in many ways, at least on the personnel side. And this is a roller coaster I really wish the city could get off of, like every other employer. The cost of health insurance is beyond at this point. We're estimating about 10%. The city is a self-insured plan. This is something that used to be a pretty smart and cost-saving measure for the city several years ago. But now we're in a situation where it's not really saving us as much compared to other plans out there, but there are limited plans options. There's not a lot of options in a small state like Vermont for us to easily transition out of and have a comparable plan. Our benefits are robust, as they should be for city employees, but this continues to be a crushing cost. And the real solution, frankly, is to blow the entire system up and make a more sensible system. But that's not something I can do as mayor. I wish I had a magic wand, but as a large employer, at least in this part of the state, I just want to name that this continues to be a crushing expense that then informs really hard budget cycles. And then, of course, we have retirement and workers' comp, which are the estimates there. Next slide. I always like to rail on health insurance for a hot second, so thank you very much for that. In terms of operating expenses, we made some assumptions as we build this budget. I should also say a little PSA. Burlington, for whatever reason, for probably decades at this point, develops its budget sort of out of sequence with pretty much every other town's budget development process. The mayor delivers a budget per charter to the city council by mid-June. We, of course, have town meeting day in March, and many other communities and school districts prepare their budgets in the fall before town meeting day. But it's been Burlington's practice, I'm not really sure why, to really not deliver in detail the budget until May and sometimes mid-June. I am trying to pull this all earlier in the process so that when we give you a tax rate increase, it's really informed on tangible numbers and tangible need. And so just know we are doing our best to move this earlier each year. This is my third budget. The first one, frankly, doesn't count because I had 6 weeks to deliver it as a new mayor. But we need to keep moving everything earlier so you all have much more firm numbers. But I want to really emphasize the tax increase when we get to it is, and you'll see the figures are very strategically based on known figures for police and fire. And that's why that splinter tax was advanced. I should have started with that. But while we were building this budget earlier than usual, we are making these assumptions. And the last piece on the operating side is a 3% assumption for all the other operating expenses. And then a brief moment on fleet. So on the bond increase last year for the general obligation bond, the GO bond, which thank you to voters who supported that very important investment. That bond was for the larger fleet of vehicles. So think the big fire trucks, think the plow trucks, the big expensive ones. Those things are very expensive. Part of our fleet is also smaller vehicles, and we have deferred the keeping up with the maintenance and the replacement of these smaller vehicles. And we're at a breaking point now, especially for first responders, which is why this is in our operating budget assumptions. We can't keep kicking it down the road, frankly, folks. Okay, next slide. So why do we have this structural budget gap? And I just want to give some highlights here. Again, I'm not going to read every line here. The first big one is that the ongoing continued issue of our grand list not growing at the same rate of the cost of running the city. So on average, our grand list, which is where we draw our property tax revenue from, has only grown about 1% year after year. And you can see this like bar chart to the side. It goes back over the last 20 years or so. And that becomes an issue when your operating expenses and just the cost of living is obviously more than 1%. And we move on to the next slide. This is all going to be posted so folks have access to this in more detail. The second big reason is that the city has over-relied on one-time funds to build out a lot of services and programs and staffing over the last several years. A lot of cities and towns have done this. I'm not saying Burlington is an exception here. However, we are now at the end of ARPA, and we're also at the end of other additional kind of COVID response and other sometimes state-related grants. And so we need to move away from this practice and make sure we have sustainable revenue sources, especially when we add new programming. Another piece I want to add here is we've also are making sure that we're going back through past budgets and anything that was one-time revenue. Last year, we did more enforcement on overdue delinquent property taxes and unpaid gross receipts, for example. But anytime we're upping our enforcement, that's just catching up on what we should have collected already. That's not an ongoing revenue source, if that makes sense. So this all again informs a piece of our structural budget gap. Next slide. And the last kind of like the three big headers, the last piece is that over the last, prior to my administration, the 10 years prior to that, the city decided to build out significant more services and programs, and staff come along with that. And we added 98 FTE positions, full-time equivalent positions, which comes with salary and benefits for a whole host of different kinds of positions over those 10 years. However, a lot of this was added with, not all, but a lot was added with that one-time funding. ARPA was a big source for a chunk of those positions. And we did not identify ongoing sustainable revenue sources once that ARPA money ended. When I was in the legislature, we grappled with this same problem. There are many deserving things that the state stood up, but now the state's in this position too of having to decide what programs do we end, because we do not have, without spiking taxes significantly, we do not have ongoing revenue once the federal dollars dried up. Next slide. So with this $10 to $12 million budget gap for this upcoming year, what is our approach to solving it? And it's three parts. We're continuing to look for ways to raise revenue, but keeping affordability in mind. And that's what I'm largely here to talk to you about the tax rate increase on the budget, on the ballot. The second is continuing to do our right sizing work within government. I'll speak to that in a minute. And then realizing strategic opportunities. These are the creative additional ways of trying to figure out how else can we leverage the city assets to be able to present a really balanced approach for closing this gap. Next slide. So to the police and fire tax, we could be here all night if I explain every single splinter tax the city has, but we have two related to police and fire. And these are dedicated revenue sources. When you look at your bill, it's just the total. But within that, and actually if you flip over your property tax bill, if you're a homeowner and property taxpayer, we actually go into all of the 14 plus splinter tax, and you'll see police and fire broken out. But the money raised on those particular pieces of your tax bill can only be used for traditional police and fire operations, meaning that when we increase it, that's the only money that can be used for that. And we are asking voters to consider this because we want to give you the context of what our two largest departments, being police and fire, cost the city and how little the splinter tax actually covers that. So this is really an investment in our community safety priority that the whole, I would say largely the entire community has been calling for this city to work towards. And this will go towards supporting the increased costs that we project will be for just on the police and fire parts of the budget. So at 5 cents, which is the request to voters, that would raise $3 million. And that $3 million, as you can see on the third bullet, is just about what the compensation and benefits increase will be for next year. It's sort of like a 1-for-1 kind of logic there. Down towards the bottom, you can see those departments combined cost the city about almost $40 million. And those splinter taxes alone only raise about 16% of that overall cost. This item has to go through council to get on the ballot, and it did receive bipartisan support 9-3 last week at the city council meeting, and therefore it will be on your ballot. Next slide. So what's the impact of that increase of the splinter tax? So that splinter tax would, on a house that the $353,000 is the median assessed value of a home in Burlington. So we took that sort of middle number and applied the municipal tax rate increase. And that would be for the year, an increase of $285. Which is about a 9% increase over from last year. We tried really hard last year to keep a very minimal increase while also doing some significant right sizing of the size of the budget. But there's really no way to avoid having to ask for a bit more revenue in order to not have to do even more deeper cuts within the city's budget. Next slide. So a little bit about the other balanced solutions. I've talked a little bit. I'm here largely to speak to the tax rate increase portion of it, but we're going to continue to use other one-time revenues, which are some leftover pieces of splinter taxes. This is very small piece of the solution because, as I said before, we're trying to get away from this practice, but we also don't want to put everything into reductions of services. If we have additional resources we can find. We're going to continue to enhance collections. This means people who owe the city money, to be perfectly honest. There are payment plans. I'm happy to talk more about this, but there's several folks who, property owners who are in arrears with paying property taxes. And there are businesses who are in arrears with paying gross receipts taxes to the city. And there are people who have not paid their parking tickets. So we're going after what is actually due to the city. And of course, if there are folks on fixed incomes, there's state law that we're using for payment plans for context, but some have been sitting on the books for a very long time. And so the city is going to continue to do our due diligence to collect these owed fees and taxes. The piece on right sizing that I just want to speak to briefly before I wrap up and hand it to Kelly. We are continuing to do some significant review of our budget and reductions. There's no way to offer you a balanced budget with a modest tax increase. I know any tax increase it feels like a significant increase for certain folks. But I've asked every department to look at their budgets and reduce by 5 to 10%. And that's no small task considering last year we had a 25-person reduction in our workforce to try to close last year's budget gap. This issue keeps going on, as I mentioned, for those 3 big reasons. But we're trying to further tighten our belts to show voters that we are truly trying to get down to essential core services while only asking for what we absolutely need in the tax rate. We take that very seriously. We are also adding some creative solutions on the personnel side, including exploring a voluntary furlough program with city staff, trying to work with our unions there. There's another piece of that might include a temporary freeze on open positions, just trying to be creative around closing this gap without just doing all cuts or doing all cuts and a tax increase, trying to diversify our options. Next slide. So that's a quick summary for you. We have another structural budget gap this year. I've been asked at other MPAs, this is not something that's going to be solved even in this year. We're continuing to narrow the gap, but we are hopefully making some big strides to really get our budget under control and truly right size. We're trying this balanced approach with 3 solutions. March 3rd is, of course, town meeting day, and a Board of Finance will get a more detailed presentation of the budget by department in April. That has traditionally been done in May. So again, moving everything a bit earlier. And with that, I'm happy to, you want me to take questions first and then go to you, or would you like to present and then we do questions together? What do you think?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we can do a little bit of Q&A and then we can have Kelly take on from there. So does anybody have any questions for the mayor?
Am I allowed one or many?
Well, let's see how it goes.
You know how to find me, Brooke, so you can ask me.
Okay, so just an FYI, I understand to a certain degree, support the 5 cent, but that's gonna make $500 impact on my tax bill, so it's not small. The reduction of the homestead tax rate by $30,000, my understanding is that's intolerant to value of the property or income of the person doing it.
So what you're asking about is the tax exemption affordability proposal that was going to be a non-binding question. It was voted down by the majority of the council, so we were not able to continue this conversation with voters, which I'm disappointed about, because it was an advisory question to continue to get basically thousands of people to weigh in on whether we should continue pursuing this. It is a straightforward one strategy for figuring out how to create more affordability in a targeted way, not 100% targeted, because some people can live in low to moderately assessed houses and have a high income, of course. But it's used in other parts of the country, for the very dynamics that we see here in Burlington, where property values continue to march upward and people's incomes don't always march up in the same proportional way. So it's something I thought was worth exploring to see how we could try to advance some level of affordability in a way that doesn't take on more than what we have authority to do. We can't assess income tax, for example, without a big reform to our charter change. I'm not sure that state government would allow us to do that anyway. And we're just trying to explore what other municipalities have done that we can try on here to provide some sort of income sensitized version to our municipal tax side of the bill. Right now, only people who make less than $47,000 have any tax relief on the municipal side of the bill, or if you're a disabled veteran. So we do have early versions of this, but hopefully we can keep the conversation going later in the year, perhaps on this or variations, so we can do the more research and more engagement to bring more folks along in support of this ideally.
But do you feel
Mhm.
that we're being straightforward with the renters and the businesses in the community that will have to foot this bill? It's an if thing, right?
Right.
But all things have unintended consequences.
Well, we were actually pretty straightforward. This was researched by my tax fairness working group for like a good 8-9 months or so, based on what other municipalities did. We did a pretty comprehensive memo with the estimates on the what could possibly be passed on to renters if it 100% passed through from landlord to renter. Of course, it has to be revenue neutral for the city. We could not, in good conscience, propose something that would put us even more in the red. And I think it's a time to start having a conversation about paying the fair share so we keep the city affordable for working people. We constantly have this issue, even as an employer, where people can't afford to live in Burlington, and so many of even just city staff commute here over an hour to come. And these are sometimes our emergency responders who are coming in to run our wastewater treatment plant or plow the roads. And so we have to start the conversation somewhere. And I think I'm going to switch on to budget questions, because this is not even on the ballot, Brooks, if you don't mind. And I'm happy to talk to you more about this offline.
Let me make one more comment and then you can shut me down. So 10 million. So if I look at what we consider an affordable house in Burlington, which means that as a single person, you make $75,000. Affordable housing. That's what it takes to have the rent low enough to be able to afford if you make $75,000. So if I do my stupid math and I say $10 million at $75,000 a person, that's over 100 FTEs that need to leave the government. So of course, thank you very much for your articulation of how you're increasing revenue and stuff like that, but that's a really big number.
So I don't know if I've totally followed you there completely, but around kind of, are we connecting that back to the tax advisory question? Yep.
And I said, okay, if I'm assuming.
Are you going back to the budget gap? I'm sorry. Yep.
Get
Yep.
an affordable wage.
Yep.
Which in our definition would be you can afford a house and you make over 75,000. So I took 75 grand. Plotted in 10 million.
Yep.
130 people. FTEs.
Yep.
That's a big gap.
It's a very much a big gap. And as we're, trying to educate folks, this has been brewing for a number of years, year after year. And part of what we are now at the point of, like, lots of municipalities and states is starting to figure out what we can afford, to be perfectly honest, and having a conversation with counselors around what are core and essential services in the city and continuing to right size. That reduction of 5 to 10% by department, there is going to be a reduction, in services in this city that we are trying to make sure are not obviously core and essential services that we're required to do by ordinance or charter or otherwise. Because it's time for us to make sure we're having real conversations about what we can truly afford. Because these gaps will continue to happen if we don't, again, do the belt tightening that we need to do. And that's not what I thought I came here to do as mayor, but it is something that I'm brave enough to bring to the community because I really am committed to finding ways to make this the most affordable city we can. Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Any other questions for the mayor?
I can't believe
Okay. Actually, I have one. Has there been, going over your work and whatnot with putting the proposed budget, has there been any speculation on what programs or services could potentially be cut down the road? So if there's anything like willing to be shared presently.
Right. So we don't have those proposals ready yet for public consumption. What we're doing at each board of finance, and our last one was about 2 weeks ago, it's like landing a plane. We started at 10,000 foot level to make sure people understood the structural budget gap in December. And then we brought it down to about 8,000 feet where we're trying to explain like what our diversity of solution or balanced solutions would be based on best estimates on what we would get, for example, from a voluntary furlough program. People can look back at Board of Finance. There's a much more detailed presentation than this one tonight around those different ideas we're trying on. We asked all city employees for ideas. We received about 150 plus ideas that we have vetted and gone through. I always think rank and file have a lot more insight sometimes around things we could be doing better or more efficiently or maybe end doing. So we're vetting those proposals. And so we're putting a lot of those, it's taking time to do all that level of analysis and see what would be most advantageous for the city that has the least impact, ideally, of course, on the workforce, without making promises. That will be my last option is around another reduction in force, but we are in serious times and I do not want to overpromise that isn't part of it. So I would say probably by March, we'll have more details for folks. Again, we're moving everything a lot earlier, but we are working with counselors. So counselors have been briefed on some initial ideas confidentially in small groups because we don't do quorum. So your city councilor should be, and encourage them to please attend these meetings, but should be getting some early information so that they are engaged and have some earlier information before the budget is officially delivered to them. Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes.
Bill, middle of your grab mic right there.
Have any ideas how to increase the grade list?
Yes, well, actually, earlier that's not January anymore, is it? Okay, last month now. I announced a housing strategy, something we've been working on for the last 6 months. That's part of it, is to make sure that we are infilling and strategically diversifying how we've done housing and dusting off some of our tools that we've used for the last 40 years to make sure it actually produces more housing. So one piece that I'm particularly excited about is making sure that we're using the neighborhood code zoning changes we did in March of 2024, right before I became mayor, that we can actually implement that and make sure that individuals and small developers can actually use that tool and have basically for the city to become even better facilitators of that zoning ordinance. Because right now we've not seen the uptick or the uptake of that zoning change in ways that we need. So that would include things like make it easier for people to add ADUs in their backyard if they have the space and ability, adding, making a single a single unit into a duplex, those kinds of pieces. And we're looking with our Office of City Planning of how, again, as facilitators, we can make this as easy as possible for folks so that people, for example, don't have to hire your own, architect to design. Like, can we do pre-approved plans, things like that? It's the democratizing element of the housing strategy that I think will really activate and accelerate the advancement of more housing. Affordability, of course, is a huge part of that as well. And that's where, dusting off some of our good, but tools that have not really been producing as much affordable housing as I would like them to. That's our inclusionary zoning ordinance and how we use our housing trust fund. So more to come on both of those elements, but I want to make sure that we are able to, again, add more housing, which by default does grow our grand list, and it grows our grand list even more if we can get more people in on the action, meaning like individuals and small developers. Start.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Al.
Charlie and then Chris.
As usual, I'm trying to get the number 11 bus to go from College Street to the hospital to the airport to Tilly Drive, working on that. But the buses, as far as I know, the rest of the buses are doing fine and everybody's happy with them. And it's very good that they're running because, well, parking is tough. I have yet to make sense out of the new Main Street design. But I hope everything works out with the projects, with the taxes. I think it'd be great to use the library more in the evenings for community than already happened. It would take a bit of security at times, but that's normal at the library now. And building community is a real uphill battle with the internet, as you know, and it's very important. I was at the demonstration today at the Federal Building, which was great. Show of solidarity and outrage. And I cannot believe that anybody thinks masks are a good idea, but I think you're doing fine. And it's really, all of these are kind of uphill battles, but hopefully we just keep walking uphill and get to the top.
Chris.
Yeah, and one of your initial slides, I think you said that there were 98 positions that were created with a one-time grant money ARPA. What's the total dollar value of those positions?
I don't have that top of my head. We can get it for you though.
And what percentage of that total dollar value would you say is one-time versus?
Again, it depends on the dollar source, the source, because some of it was ARPA, some of it was like grant funding from the state, for example. I think there was about 30 FTEs that were ARPA related, maybe 38. It's somewhere in the 30 to 40 range that we did present to city council sometime in the last year. So again, we can look back to a Board of Finance presentation on this when we brought this up during fiscal year 26 budget building process as well. But again, remember, these are all types of positions ranging from community safety officers, which are important roles that we should continue in my mind because it's a community safety kind of role, to community safety liaisons. And so those were just some examples of some of the ARPA funds. Other jobs have already been eliminated over time because we had a community response. This is not the proper word, but during COVID, we had a CEDO ran. I'm not putting you on the spot, Barbara. CEDO ran a COVID response center. That's not the proper term, but obviously we don't operate that anymore. So some of those positions have already been cut. And so it's a mix of different positions, but overall, the size of the workforce that's supported by the general fund has grown by 98 FTEs. And that is not something that we've been able to sustain with the growth of the grand list alone, as I was sort of sharing before.
So just doing some quick math, assume mid-level salary, say $50,000 times 98, that comes out to like 4.9 million. And if we said maybe 75,000 times 98, that's 7.35 million there. So I think that makes your case about what's driving the budget here, and certainly something to look at. You mentioned the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that? Like how that works, like, where the money goes, how, we hear about it a lot, but I think a lot of folks are kind of nebulous, don't really understand it.
Sure. So just briefly, the Housing Trust Fund is something that's been on the books for a couple decades now, probably even longer. I think it was started during Bernie's time as mayor, or at least it was very active at least in the 90s or so. And so it is largely the city's way to raise capital to build affordable housing. And so it's generated by a couple different ways. One of the primary ways is when new development of a sizable size is built, a developer must either add affordable units in that building itself or pay a payment in lieu, and that payment in lieu funds the Housing Trust Fund. One of the reasons why it's sort of become a tool that's not as effective is the cost of construction has gone sky high. That means that payment in lieu looks a lot more attractive than building the actual affordable housing units. And this has, we still get something, but we can't do as much either with that smaller amount of money because it doesn't go as far with new construction projects. The other sizable revenue stream, there might be more, is Airbnb and short-term rentals. There's a tax that goes right into the Housing Trust Fund from those rentals, if you will, in the city. What tends to happen is that you probably don't hear a lot about the Housing Trust Fund because we have to let it build up over the course of 2 or 3 years before we have enough of a check, essentially, to invest in a development project that meets the city standards. And so for our purposes, we're looking to other cities that have figured out a way to revamp how they do their housing trust funds. I used to have these cities off the top of my head, but they've actually been able to build more actual units, which is really what our mission should be. It shouldn't be just building up enough money to add a piece of a pie. Like we put some of our housing trust fund money into the post apartments that are about to open around the corner here, for example, but that's not an accelerated strategy. So we're trying to think about other usable, allowable uses of the housing trust fund that could help us activate even more housing.
Any other questions?
UVM use some of the same fire services, and is there leverage we can use to like make them pay more money? They have so much money.
Well, their federal money is drying up, so they do have a lot more money than the city. I will give you that. But they have a lot of federal money that's also drying up. It's impacting everybody, right, in many ways. But we are in we're in a 1-year extension for the fee for service that we negotiate back and forth with UVM. UVM actually pays us 2 things. One is a pilot, which is by state law, that's been apparently flat since maybe 2000 or so, of $750,000. And then we can negotiate on top of that, but it's a voluntary agreement. And so it is my mission to make sure that we talk about all the services beyond police and fire that supports UVM, and make sure that we make the case. That's done when you build strong relationships. And I have a good relationship so far with this new president, very purposefully, because I think she understands that the well-being of Burlington is intertwined with the well-being of UVM. We're going on a ride along together with the firehouse that serves UVM to really put some of this illustration in play. I'm not talking logically now. We'll illustrate our actual need. And we have until June 30th to negotiate the new deal. So I'm hoping we can start to be a little more expansive. One thing I'm going to say that gives me hope is that we were a little more expansive with a voluntary agreement with UVM Medical Center last year. And we put into that, while there wasn't a fee out of that agreement, we started opening the door for larger conversations that can help strategically put them in a place of better partnership with the city. One tiny example that we just got data back on is that they have to have a transportation plan for their employees to mitigate the impact of many more people driving into the city to work at UVM Medical Center. And so instead of paying 50% of their bus passes, which is what had been under the prior agreement with UVM Medical Center, we pushed them to pay 100%, like a free bus pass. And shocking probably to no one, when you give people free buses, they will ride them more. And the ridership over the last 2 months of data has significantly grown. And I use that as an example just because when we could think a little bit more expansively and make the case for what is collectively good for this city and for the employers who want to be good partners, we can get good things to happen beyond what we've maybe traditionally done.
Well, I believe this brings us to the end of our time block for the budget presentation and also the question about the 5 cent tax. So either way, thank you for coming down, and we'll love to have you come back when there's more updates on the budget. And we'll be moving on to the town meeting day ballot question with our newest RAB director, Dr. Kelly Perkins, and she'll be talking about the charter change. So.
Well, very good. Greetings, Ward 3. I'm so glad to be with you all today to talk about the proposed charter change to add the Office of Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging as a permanent part of the city government. Again, my name is Kelly Perkins. I use she, her pronouns. And thanks for joining me today. So this evening, I'm going to take just a few minutes to walk through what the proposed charter change is, what voters are being asked to decide, what REIB's scope of work currently is, and what we're looking to move towards, and what are the implications of this change for Burlington. Next slide, please. And so on March 3rd, Burlingtonians are being asked to cast their votes to decide whether or not REIB will be added to the city's charter. The city charter, as many of you know, is the foundational document that outlines the city's powers, organization, and functions, including defining which of the parts of the government are permanent. And while equity and inclusion efforts have been a fundamental and well-documented part of the city of Burlington since about the early 2000s, incorporating REIB into the city's charter makes these a permanent part of the city's infrastructure. I think that what the mayor was saying about that expansiveness is really what this is about. How can we get the most expansive for each other and our community, and making sure that we're all being served with the fullness by our city government. And so to inform your decision, I want to explain some of REIB's work and significance in city government thus far. Next slide, please. And so just to center us, so we're all talking about the same thing, equity, DEI, right, in city government are practical tools for evaluating how well our systems work, right? They help us to look at city services, policies, are just how we're designing our workplaces in general, thinking about who our services reach, whether they work effectively for the people who rely on them. This is about systems and outcomes, not our individual beliefs. Burlington is the second most diverse city in our state, right? With residents who have different languages, abilities, ages, incomes, and lived experiences. Recognizing this the vast differences among us helps the city to know that one size fits all approaches just do not work. Equity means that we are recognizing that people start from different places, not our fault, but we must take responsibility. And fair access sometimes means that different approaches are required, like accessible buildings, right? Captioned videos, flexible work arrangements, multiple ways to engage with city services, our language access throughout the city, right? It's all DEI. These are practical design choices. They're not ideological ones, right? Inclusion focuses on whether people feel welcomed, informed, and if they're able to participate in city government, again, with a fullness. When we apply this DEI lens, city systems work better and serve the entire community more effectively. This is about being more expansive. Next slide, please. And so what does REIB do and what does it matter for Burlington? Some examples of the work that REIB has done across city government and with stakeholders to ensure that city services are effective, fair, accessible, and informed by the people who rely on those services include supporting city departments in the development, coordination, and implementation of programs and services to ensure consistency and accessibility. Providing training, education, and guidance for city staff, boards and commissions, community stakeholders, and Burlington School District. We create structured and informal ways for community members to engage directly with city government. And this happens via our trusted community voices. They represent 7 of our city's immigrant and refugee communities. They bring lived experience and community insights to inform projects, programs, and policy implementation. We also host community conversations on topics impacting our full community, such as partnering with the Special Assistant to End Homelessness to engage community members in that discussion. We've also had community discussions around housing, right? And we also have monthly REIB Council Committee meetings where constituents have an opportunity to engage with city councilors and REIB staff. So why does this matter? First, it helps the city and community respond to diverse needs and community identified needs, right? First, thinking about inclusive governance, the city of Burlington is again the second most diverse city in the state. And so as such, we have a responsibility to prioritize work that fosters inclusivity by reflecting the diverse identities, experiences, and needs of all our community members. DEI supports a strong local economy. We help to strengthen economic opportunity, right? Studies show that diverse and inclusive environments contribute to innovation, right? Creativity and productivity, enhancing the overall economic vitality of a city, creating jobs and attracting new businesses, right? In other words, if you keep doing the same thing, you get the same results, right? And so how do we bring more people to the table so that we can be expansive about the future of our city? And it brings diverse perspectives into city decision-making and builds trust, right? We want to enhance community well-being and resilience by addressing systemic barriers and fostering inclusive environments where we create a stronger social fabric that promotes trust, collaboration, and belonging. This approach not only benefits individuals from diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds, but also enhances the quality of life for the entire community, leading to a more engaged, resilient, and thriving city where everyone can feel valued and fully participate. Last slide, please. And so one of the things we've been talking about is the budget, right? And this vote is asking you again to decide if this work should be a permanent codified part of our city government structure, right? Again, this isn't new work for Burlington. It is well documented. And this work has taken on different iterations over the last almost 30 years. Right now, it is being operationalized as REIB. We provide coordination, expertise, and continuity for work that already exists, right? And so this vote isn't about staffing or about the dollars. Those are, again, ongoing decisions. We're also making decisions about our budget in the manner that all city departments have been tasked with. But this vote is about simply codifying our future and our ability to continue to be expansive as a city and make sure that we are being fully inclusive so we can have the best Burlington that we all can envision for years to come. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, do you have any questions for Director Perkins? Comments?
So what does 0.7% of the general fund mean in dollars?
Dollars about 700.
So I'm sure our gracious mayor is challenging.
Everyone has the same.
But, okay. I'm sorry to be focused on the budget gap, whatever we're calling it, but my taxes keep going up and up and up. But thank you very much. It was a great presentation.
REB is one of our smallest departments, just to be clear. So small or large, everyone was tasked with the same assignment.
Okay, thank you.
Chris, you had a question? Just your hand go up.
Yeah, just a follow up to my prior question. I know you're going to get us the exact dollar number. Is there a list on the city website of all of the positions? I know that 7 days, I think, did a feature story on it, but I don't know how much detail they went into that, but it would be curious to see which types, because you mentioned there was a variety of them. I think it would be insightful to see which positions fall into that bucket, so to speak.
Again, I would point you back to the Board of Finance presentations in the budget building of fiscal year 26. Those are, again, those would be specific to the one-time ARPA related. That's what we were focused on. And that, again, I can't remember the exact number, 30 something positions that were specific to ARPA to be able to identify what those positions were. We don't have a full list of all the 98, but that's a wide range over 10 years and would take a lot of backtracking. And right now, what I've asked our city department has to be focused on is closing the $10 to $12 million budget gap. If we have more capacity, perhaps we could do deeper analysis, but right now I'm asking everyone to make sure that we close this gap first, and then we can do further analysis from there.
For recognize you. Any other members of the Assembly want to? Yep.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention a few things. As the mayor has previously discussed, since day one, she's been looking at this budget and been really laser focused. So I just want to make sure people are aware that this department has already undergone some significant cuts in previous years. So in addition to having to look at the budget again, as was mentioned earlier, department heads have been tasked with looking at cutting 5%, 10%. What would that look like? This is a department that has already had their staff cut back and other funds cut back. So I just want everyone to be aware of that. That we're looking for some departments to go deeper than they did before, and other departments to just look at things differently, but it's not the first year that cuts are occurring. So just to let people know that. And I also wanted to stress how important I think this vote is. Our district, Central District, Wards 2 and 3, next to the city of Winooski, is the largest, most diverse place. And it's not just about race. When we say inclusion, we look at what's happening to our trans neighbors, right? We have a lot of people under attack. We see what's happening at the federal government. We had a couple of cases today where we had residents, someone in Burlington and then someone who was taken from St. Albans. We have to be looking at things differently, and we have to ask ourselves, what is our commitment to our neighbors? And I really feel that that's a big part of this vote. Thank you. And I hope you vote yes.
I actually have a question for Perkins. So understanding the nature of the department and given its name, I assume that the city, this RAB has done a lot of work looking into racial and cultural differences and how to address them, and making sure everyone can be on the equitable playing field. And to pare it down, like say outside of the communities of color, it's like, what other inequities is your department finding, and plans or initiatives that could be potentially upheld to help out those other communities, like low-income elderly or the LGBTQA community as well? Like, what other microcosms are you guys finding?
A wonderful question. As I was doing this presentation, I said, oh, I should have added some more of this in here. And so during these last just really 6 months of this office, we've absorbed, right, because of some of the reorging, the language access program, right, for CEDO. That is not just immigrants and refugees who identify, right, as people of color, right? We know that, again, we're thinking about now how we expand out to Braille, right? That is something that is missing in many of our city buildings for sure. And thinking about folks who have that their language access need is because of hearing or vision disabilities, right? We are taking on the Aging Council. And really trying to restart that group who did a lot of great work. I believe back in 2024, I'm like, what year is it right now? And so really working now to begin implementation of some of the great thoughts and ideas that came out of that group. I hear in the undertone of the question, the race part, right? And I think that we know that we have to acknowledge really the founding of our shared country, right? And where we kind of where we started from. And I think that, we know that if we can think about those who are most impacted by the systems of our city, of our state, of our country when they're not working, right? There is a disproportionate impact, and if we can control for that, we do help everyone all the way up and around and broadly. We're also getting to engage fun things like our Sister Cities program and thinking about how we can help them. And they're very excited to think about how they deepen the ability for residents of Burlington to engage in cultural connection across borders with the various cities we serve, which includes cities in Europe. We now have a Senegalese site. We also have sites in South America and Nicaragua. So we are really trying to get expansive, even in our own understanding of this work, and broaden it, but also deepen that work. I hope that answers your question.
Oh yeah, no, it certainly does. I think the root of my question is that the name of the department is racial equity, inclusion and belonging, but you're also assuming so many other responsibilities of other departments because of, the reorging and how the city's budget, that whole deck's going to get reshuffled. So,
Yeah, to call it absorbing, I would say that part of the mayor's right sizing government, right, is how do we put things where they should be, right, to maximize our coordination, our collaboration, our ability to do right by residents. And so if we're thinking about something that impacts the whole city, right, like language access, maybe Seattle was never the place, right? If somebody at some point picked that up, because that was a need. And so part of this right sizing means putting things where they belong so that we all can flourish.
okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, go ahead.
Little. I live in a Burlington Housing Authority building, and they could use help in facilitating the 10 or 20 languages spoken, rarely spoken, but spoken in our building. Actually, it's two buildings that are joined, but there are 65 apartments, and it's elderly and disabled. And a number of them have just no way of getting English going. And I think maybe they identify with their language and don't really want to bother being bad at English, but it will help them to know things, even if it's just help. So if you got in touch with BHA, it could help. I don't know if Champlain is doing anything more.
I'm going to just jump in here, Charlie. That's a great question because folks, I didn't actually know this before I was mayor. The mayor appoints members of the board for the Burlington Housing Authority, as this happens with housing authorities across the country. And so I engage with everyone who's on a mayoral appointee. I just met with the one whose term is up. And so we do have an active relationship with BHA. So this is a great piece of feedback. I am also you might have read maybe 2+ years ago when Decker Towers was having issues, security and safety issues in its building, which is much more stabilized. If you want to catch up on the story a little bit, I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's much more stabilized. One of those reasons is they have a residents council in that building, which means the residents organized to create an organization to more formally engage BHA for the needs of that building. Wharf Lane has now since also developed a council, and over on Riverside, which is another BHA complex of buildings, they're trying to get another resident council started. I mentioned that because that is a highly populated immigrant, I actually don't know, but I assume multiple languages based on the last time I door knocked there as a council candidate many years ago. I'm sure it's even more diverse now. So this language access piece is a great point, and we'll make sure that, between the two of us, we engage that board so they understand the need of being responsive to residents, which is part of their charge. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, go ahead, Al.
I want to think about elderly people as needing diversity and belonging. Thinking about traffic safety, sidewalk safety, and bus 11.
Among other buses.
So remember us.
Desperately working on it.
Good.
It's you're from Ward 5, right?
Or fine, yeah.
All right, just wanted to, just for a little bit of a housekeeping thing. Any other questions from the Ward 3 membership before? All right, Breen?
Just wanna, so my name is Fareed. I do live in Ward 5, but I'm also a volunteer for a People's Kitchen project. It's a mutual aid project that serve free food. We've been around since the pandemic, and we have received a lot of help from RAID, the Department of Racial Equity and Inclusion and Belonging. We do a weekly delivery of groceries and fresh vegetables from the Intervale to my neighborhood, which is in the south end at South Meadow. And those are the families are about a third are Somali refugees and another third are Nepali or Bhutanese. And the other third are like Vermonters who have been here for like 7 generations. They were all low income. And thanks to the help from RAID, like we've been able to keep the delivery every week for the last 5 years now, every Friday. So we also serve free dinner at City Hall Park 3 nights of the week. And last year we received a grant from the department to get a cargo bike, which really helped with our ability to pick up donation and then to make the targeted delivery. The majority of the people we serve are our on-house neighbors, but we really serve anybody. So having the bike has been a great help for us in that we can reach people we weren't able to previously. So thank you very much for all your help, and I hope you all will vote yes on the ballot question.
Okay. Feeling that this topic is moving a little, this piece is moving a little bit ahead of schedule. I'll be wrapping up and moving on to candidate forums. But before further, thank you, Mayor Emma Mulvaney-Stanek and Director Kelly Perkins for coming down and discussing the 2 ballot items. And hopefully we can have this conversation going amongst ourselves as a community over the next few days, actually the next month before Election Day. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Be well.
Thank you.
And on to our next.
Is it okay?
Okay. Charlie, we're good?
Good.
All right. And moving on to our next piece, we have the candidate forum, but as of right now, we only have candidate Laura Sanchez Parkinson's, and probably one of the more important questions on the ballot: who will be representing Ward 3 on City Council?
Hi, everyone. Very nice to be with you in community today. Thank you for having me. I know I've been able to meet several of you. I did pass around a little flyer, which if you didn't get one, let me know at the end. That's a little write-up at the back, a little bit more about myself. I wanted to introduce myself. I think that as a human being, as a person, it's important to know who you are. And so I'll share a little bit about myself, but I also want to be able to be in community with you all and answer any questions that you may have or thoughts, questions, ideas, and be in conversation with you all.
Okay. You can say your name again.
Yes, I am Laura Sanchez Parkinson and running for City Council of Ward 3. Thank you, Charlie. Always reminding me. So a little bit about myself. I live in Old North End with my family. I have 2 kids that go to Sustainability Academy. And I think one of the main reasons that I wanted to run for City Council is one, because I'm very community oriented and very much been able to engage with the community, not only through the schools, but also thinking very much about just how our city works for everyone who lives in the community. So one, just really thinking about how can I bring my experiences, my commitment, my time, my energy to be able to support those who are living within our neighborhood. I feel like a very proud Ward 3 resident, and I'm hoping that to continue to sort of carry that pride that I know is within our neighborhood, to represent our city, one of the most diverse wards, and really thinking about how can we be a model and representative of community for the rest of our city. I'll share a little bit about my professional background because I think that that'll inform how I approach, how I vote, how I engage with folks. So my professional background is in organizational management. And so when we're talking about the economy and our budgets and how our government is structured, that is something that I'm very passionate about. I think a lot about how organizations can be efficient organizations, effective organizations. But I think what makes my background unique is very much thinking about how do we create efficient governments that are also equitable. And that is a tension, I think, that just historically we often experience as a society, because I think across the board, most of us think that equity and inclusion is very valuable. But when we come against money and when we come against our own wallets, that's when we have to make the hard decisions. And so I am curious actually to know, like, I want to hear from folks who are questioning whether to vote yes or no or on the ballot for the RV charter, because I think that that helps us understand how we can come to terms in terms of being a city that values equity and inclusion, and we also need to right-size our government as well. I want to just briefly expand on some of the issues. I won't go through all of them, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm going to start with sustainable local economy because of this theme that we have going on around our budget and our economy. I come from a family that own a number of small businesses, and so I know the importance of being able to support our local economy, the ways that we as a society can build our own systems to support and serve each other. I think Burlington in particular is very unique because we are a city that is home to many visitors that are coming from outside. And so we have to sort of balance this. How do we sustain our own economy for ourselves? And then how do we also leverage the assets that we have as a community to invite others as visitors, whether they're short-term or longer term. So I'm very much thinking about how can we make decisions in a way that are both supporting us and our community and our needs here locally and as well as our visitors. One more note in terms of our own community here, I'm thinking a lot about our workforce. The mayor mentioned the ways that some of our largest employers, like the government, like UVM, like the Burlington School District, these big employers that we have in our city, and when most of the staff and employees are driving in from outside. And I just really think, how do we create affordable housing so that our own economy can be strengthened within our city? So very much connected. I think that that's something you'll hear me talk about. All of these issues are connected in some way, and the way that we make a decision for one is going to impact the other. So I'm thinking there's lots of conversations. You mentioned, Brooke, is that right? Around some of the ideas that have been put on the table around affordable housing. I'm very much thinking about how can we be creative, and as a household that has a family of 4 of us, like I'm very much thinking about what does that look like in Burlington? If I want to stay in the city, how can I be sure that my family can afford to live here? And that also goes for many others as well. The last thing I'll mention about the different issues that are really top of mind for me right now as well is community health and safety. And that is one of my background is around mental health. And so I'm very much thinking about not only the physical well-being, like the safety that we have, but also as a community, our mental health as well, because that's impacting, again, how we feed into our workforce, how we feed into how we're engaging with one another as a community. We need to be able to be healthy, both physically and mentally. And in terms of what that looks like within our city is how are we investing in services and programs that are supporting the community safety of the infrastructure that we have for our city. I think that probably most of you all have been following the news and the ways that ICE and immigration enforcement is going across our country and the ways that they're seeping into our own city. And I'm very much thinking about community safety in those ways, not only the fear that it's creating within us, but as well as the physical threat that it is if we were to experience ICE in mass in our city. So what is our infrastructure within our city to ensure that we are resilient and that we're able to take care of one another and the community that we've been building for decades? As a city, we have opened the doors to refugees and immigrants because those are our core values. And so how are we now responding to ensuring that our city continues to be a welcoming place for those communities? I'm now going to pause and I would love to hear any comments, any questions, thoughts. Yes.
So I feel like for those computer programmers, I'm in a nested loop. So we need to make the city affordable. We want rent control, right? We don't want people driving in. But we're not paying people enough. And the business owners can't pay people. So it's like, oh, we need affordable housing. What's your definition of affordable housing? Okay, if you're $75,000 as a single or above, then this is affordable housing. So, you know, I hear the buzzwords, you know, and when I was a professional, we used to play buzzword bingo. But this nested loop, I haven't heard anything. You know, I'm hopeful that the Vermont 10% will start to, or 10% Vermont, I've forgotten which way it goes. But the money that the government is going to give, you know, 10% of their cash to be able to put towards housing. But I just don't see a way out of people making less than $75,000. So it thumbs up, right? But
Yeah,
I'm frustrated that, you know, rent control is not gonna work. So, and I'm retired, so I'm not gonna come up with all the answers, but I'm looking for a candidate or candidates to come up with an idea of how we can solve some of these problems. So I'm sorry to unload on you.
No, I feel the same way and why I'm here. Like I do feel like this is a moment where I can put in both mental energy and my time to explore some of these questions that have been on my mind as well. And one more thing that I'll mention, and I think it sort of informs how I'm thinking about the issues that you've mentioned, is that I really believe that as a community, we can come with really great solutions. And what I'm seeing is that oftentimes we're either afraid to speak to one another and to share ideas because we might feel like ideologically we are different. And so if I say something, then I might not be agreed on. And so we don't just talk about it. And I'm talking both about our own community, but also within our city council and within our government, to be honest. And so why, as you know, as Dr. Perkins was presenting, I thought to myself, I really would love to hear from folks who are on the brink of voting no, and those who have already made up their mind that they're going to vote no. And because I think that if we can have space to have open conversations and not feel like I have to have the answer. Like I have some ideas for affordable housing, but you might have some ideas too. Like let's share them together and then hopefully we can come up with some solutions. So one, that is my approach that I hope to bring as a city councilor. I really want to be able to have an open door for people to challenge my ideas and for my thinking to evolve as well. I had another thought. So I've been thinking a lot about what it means to raise a family in Burlington. And, you know, as probably many other parents, I'm like, I want to raise a family and I want to have a single home and a little backyard where my kids can go out to play. And lately, we're renters. And lately I've been really wrestling with, is that actually going to happen if we want to stay in Burlington, which we do. And to me, I'm starting to think about, what does policy along with social norms look like as we evolve? So does that mean that, like, as a parent, I now have to reimagine what raising a healthy, fun family looks like in Burlington? Does it mean that I'm, get more comfortable with the idea that I have to be in shared housing in order to live in Burlington, and maybe invest in our parks and our green spaces in our city, and make sure that our children are able to comfortably, and families are able to comfortably move back and forth throughout the city? And so I'm thinking about also, like, sociologically, how does that social norms fit into policymaking? Again, just brainstorming.
Any other questions for the candidate?
I do, but I want to make sure that I'm not the only voice in the room.
Well, I find it your ideas very refreshing, and it would be because we've had, is this on?
Yes.
I find your ideas refreshing, and I want to hear more as time goes on. One of the things that Charlie has alluded to is, in terms of inequities, I think I'm very concerned about public transportation. Well, in Ward 3, but I'm understanding that the entire state with the mountain transit is going through serious proposed downsizing. And if we're going to expand housing and decrease access into the city without a healthy public transportation system, I'm very concerned about that. So that's, but anyway, welcome to your candidacy.
Sure. Yeah, I grew up in New York City and lived in housing projects for almost 30 years, my life. So I know what it's like to be a renter. And I know what it's like to be poor. And just to comment on our previous city councils, all I want is someone who shows up and listens. Because our experience has been that no one has showed up and no one has listened.
Well, no, we have Alan, we have one of our.
No, you're not. You're not a Ward 3 city council.
Yeah, but she's also still one of our electeds.
Yes, she's one of our.
Thank you. If I may,
Finally.
before the redistricting, I was appointed 5 years. So overnight, they just said, I'm now in Ward 2. That doesn't change the fact
I was talking about.
that and that, if I count the other places that I've lived, I'm
sorry.
over 35 years.
We do appreciate it.
So I'm just letting you know.
We want our own Laura.
Right, but I am your district counselor. I have been coming here. I do take back our issues, and I know not everyone always agrees with me on some things, but I have been very, very vocal on our public safety issues.
Yes, you have.
There have been things that had come to light that showed things that I was saying, especially about our police department, were true.
It's true.
So I've been here for you, but I know what you mean. We need two voices, and I am.
Need someone who shows up and listens.
Yes, and my conversations with Laura have been fantastic. I'm very happy that she is running, and I think this is going to be great for us.
Me too.
And actually, I'm glad you've mentioned this, Milo. I am very excited to be working with Milo, to be able to be in collaboration with another counselor within that's benefiting this is the people, like you get two. And we are very much in collaboration and in communication. So I'm excited to be serving alongside Milo.
May I just add that I think that there was a confusion for a while. So I didn't know personally that I had Melo to go to. And once I figured that out, You've been very responsive, but there was a confusion because we didn't really have, there was a council person who decided not to come to the meetings. And so welcome to you. And I'm glad you're going to work together, plan to. So, but there was confusion. I think. Do you agree?
Yes.
Let's see. My mind moves very fast, unfortunately, and sometimes fortunately. But as far as getting places, yes, it's very important to be able to get places. And oh, there we go. Affordable housing. Jane Jacobs, back in the 60s, I hope you know about Jane Jacobs, The Life and Death of American Cities. She said that old buildings are where new ideas come from. There were affordable housing comes from. There were artist studios and rehearsal spots and bookstores. They all get put in old buildings because they're not still paying off the mortgage. Paying off the mortgage buildings breed chain stores. And it's very difficult to build affordable housing. If they do build new affordable housing, they really should insulate the walls. They have walls that are 4 inches of air between sheetrock. Whether you call it luxury apartments or affordable housing or anything, people don't feel at home there. They feel crowded. And all you have to do is put some care into it. And if we could find any old buildings that would be easy to make affordable housing and to make affordable things in new buildings are hard, 60,000 a year, they say, is a median income. Median income, it's like 2.2 kids. It doesn't exist. There are millionaires in town, and most of us make 30,000 or less. So there has to be housing that somehow isn't still paying off the bank so that it can be affordable.
Susie.
Kind of incentives are given to landlords in this community to keep their rents at a low rate? Like tax incentives for landlords to lower their rents so that people can afford them. There are a lot of landlords that own their buildings and they charge high rates based on their taxes they have to pay. So wouldn't it behoove the city to lower their tax rate to keep the rents down? Is what I would say. But.
I've been thinking a lot about that and why my mind has also been going towards, how do we shift our minds sometimes? Because for the past, call it 5 years or so, landlords have been benefiting quite a bit from rents going up. And right now, what I'm starting to notice is that, okay, now that's starting to stabilize itself just a tiny bit. What can we do for landlords to feel okay? I'm like, it's okay to lower your rent, you don't have to be increasing it or even keep it the same. You could lower it. You're still making like you're still bringing in home something. And so is it shifting how we're thinking about our, like, is it shifting the minds of those who are, you know, whether it's management companies or landlords themselves? And so, yes,
It's probably tough with management, but I'm thinking about single owner
Yep.
apartment owners. Probably that would be a lot easier
Yep.
than something conglomerate, but yeah.
If I may, so to your point, there are different, I guess let's call them tiers of property owners. And we do have people, they own a duplex, they live in one and they rent out the other. Or we have people who have multiple units in a home that they live and they rent out the others. We have, though, in this city, and what we need to figure out how we can address is we have, I actually picked up a sign that was blowing around in the wind, but we have a local company that starting last summer littered downtown in the Old North End with lawn signs telling people to lock in their apartments for June of 26. They were starting well ahead of a year because that's the market that we live in. This same company is known for dramatically increasing rents on individuals. We're talking hundreds of dollars a month. And they're not the only company that does that. We also are seeing this thing of communal living. We're all used to what college students do, but there are now companies that say, hey, you can pay X amount for this room where they're kind of putting people together and people are paying exorbitant amounts to have access to the bedroom. And that is kind of something new. And we're also seeing more landlords going to month leases, which allows them to increase rent multiple times a year. How do we deal with this? Because it's really out of control, and it's one of the reasons that young people don't stay the way they used to after they finish school here, and it's really hurting families. And it's hurting young people who are looking at the next stage of their lives. When we talk about our people in their late 20s, early 30s, what do they do? So this is all part of it. And the last thing I'll say quickly is I'm more for rent stabilization, not control. Landlords do need to be able sometimes to raise rent. When we look at landlords who are looking to raise rent to maintain the cost of maintaining their properties, which we know goes up with inflation. My family lived in an area in New Jersey where they had rent stabilization, where they said landlords would be allowed to raise rent yearly, at the rate of inflation plus, I think, 2%, something like that. Right. And I think that's what we need. We're not in a position where we can say to landlords, you can never raise the rent. That's not practical, but.
You know, and I totally agree with that. It's interesting that somebody that I know, the landlord in Burlington, went to raise their rent by $500 within a month. That to me is an eviction notice.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody could afford $500 more a month, they'd probably be living in a nicer apartment. So what do we do about that? Because that must cause an awful lot of evictions or people
call it rent eviction because nothing else is a problem, but all of a sudden the rent gets so high. No, you're absolutely right.
So
and that's where
so do we have a cap on that or no?
No, but that's part of looking at stabilization. Yeah. But I will leave it there so you can get back to getting to know Laura a little bit, but I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you for your insight, Councilor Grant. I actually have a question for Laura, and it is a question that is rare within Burlington and by extension Vermont politics. So you're going to be joining a legislative body of 12. There's going to be tough votes and issues ahead of you down the road. But What is one issue or set of issues that you are willing to be the sole vote on? Where what is the situation that you are willing to be the lone one in the room? When everyone else you believe is perceived to be going wrong, where would you think you're going right?
I don't think there's one issue, I would say. I do have my core values, and I think that that is first and foremost, that is how I would vote. We could take, for example, the votes that recently happened about apartheid-free community pledge and the dialogue, the resolution as well that was presented, that both went the votes went along the parties. I think for me, I would take every single decision based on what I believe. I do believe that as a city, if we want to put forward a pledge for people to vote on, I believe that we should do that. I also believe that we need to increase our ability to dialogue among each other. And so I will take, my goal is to be able to take every decision based on the context that I'm put in front of myself. And also I am really even just today's conversation was really energizing for me, being able to connect with you all here on a monthly basis and with residents on an ongoing basis to inform how I can continue to carry the voice of our community. If I'm hearing that this is something, that a vote to move forward is what our community wants and needs, and if it aligns with my core values, I want to carry that forward. I know it's not like a concrete answer, but I think I think every single vote to me I will take very seriously, and I will vote based on what I'm hearing from our community, and sort of my core principles.
Okay. All right. Thank you. No, it's just we hear a lot of there's multiple races going on around, and soon to be more races coming on during the summer. So it's rare that we have folks speak on issues that they, I guess, won't work with their other colleagues and whatnot. Is something I see that's rare within our political and civic conversation. So it's not to discourage open dialogue and whatnot, but it's to see where each one of our candidates and then electeds for actual respective line is. So thank you. Yeah. Believe Jeffrey Ferris Brooks. And we got a long one.
Thank you. Hello, Jeffrey Peterson, he, him pronouns. I live in Ward 3 on Monroe Street. My question is, most of my community here in Burlington, I grew up in the city. I moved back after going to college, and I'm being priced out of the place I call home. And most of my family members, friends, communities, coworkers are also being priced out. And there's kind of this underlying feeling that the city council and our politicians are playing politics with our housing policy. And I think on the city council, there is so much partisan infighting that the housing policies being put forward are not serious. So I'm curious what you would do differently and what your plan is to address housing affordability once elected. Thanks.
Yeah. I'm going to build on my answer that I had for Brooks earlier, which is I think that there's already extremely great ideas on the table from both sides. I think the mayor has put together, I'm actually meeting with one of the committee members on Friday, because I'm really diving into have the experts been already thinking about for the past few years. And I want to be able to build on those ideas already, because I think that there's great ideas there already. Something that I think I would like to do is to be able to be at the table and have the conversations with that variety of ideas. I mentioned my collaboration with Mila. We've already connected, and we're I share with her, I was like, what is the things that we want to make sure that we represent Ward 3 and the Central District around?
Similarly, I'm approaching those conversations with other counselors. Like, I want to have open, collaborative conversations so that we can bring all of our ideas to the table. I agree with you. I think that we can come up with some solutions and move them forward for the betterment of our city. And I really desperately want that.
We've seen a market increase in the number of homeless people living on our waterfront in the past 2 years. And there doesn't seem to be any solution in sight. Clearly our legislature has not, in my view, done what should be done to address the issue. The solutions they put forth really haven't moved the needle, and we're still seeing the issue. So what would be your approach to dealing with that here in Burlington? Like, how can we help improve the lives of those who are currently unhoused and living down there with limited resources?
I think it's a question answer topic that is really hit sort of like that core of us. And even just the various topics we've talked about today, like how many families and individuals are at the brink of becoming homeless and unhoused because of our wages in our city, because of affordability. And being a person who I don't have anyone in my family who lives anywhere near Vermont. And so oftentimes I think that a lot of our unhoused neighbors like have these unfortunately circumstances that they just don't have that support. And so how can we continue to advocate for the services that we have to ensure that they're getting, whether it's temporary housing to get them up and running, whether it's employment and workforce development to ensure that they're able to gain some sort of income to support themselves and their families. I think that we already have great services in place. Now, how do we make sure that we're making those connections? The other just thing that I'll say is sort of going back to, as you'll probably can tell, I've been thinking a lot about like how we as individuals, as a society, perceive and think about others. And that includes our unhoused neighbors. The way that we may make them feel outside of the policies, like how are we ensuring, like just as a human being, making our unhoused neighbors feel welcome, included, so that they can better approach us for help, approach our city for help and their resources, so that there's not this sort of very concrete divide between our housed and unhoused populations. And so I'm very much thinking about how to bridge a little bit more of that community so that we can be there to support them, whether it's through mental health services, whether with addiction services, whether it's a housing, whether it's I think I already said mental health, but whatever the issues, how do we create the bridge so that we're better communicating with our unhoused neighbors as well? Again, both as a city, but also just as individuals and residents of the city.
Hey. So I'm sure I'll hurt some feelings. So I watch every city council meeting. So what would you do to mitigate the inappropriate behavior on city council? So it's like I get my popcorn out and I watch them just, I won't say scream at each other, but this is, I'm okay with a diversity of thought and conversation. But to have the president have to shut people down on a regular basis, and it happens on both sides, so I'm not gonna blame, this is a bipartisan thing. But I don't, as I said, I'm gonna go have popcorn out every other Monday or whatever, and I sit 5 hours. I usually stream it, so I don't have to go through public forum for 4 hours, but it's like, holy crap. So do you have techniques or methodologies to go, whoa? We're adults, we don't have to act childishly on having adult conversations. You may not have an opinion that I agree with and vice versa, but it's getting bad.
I have two thoughts or two ways that I want to answer this. One is, like you mentioned, everybody at the table are adults, and the people who come into public forum are adults. So it's not like I myself can, like, I'm like, everybody has the freedom to say and behave, at least with somewhat regulations, right? One, there's the way that I, as an individual, as Lauda, will come to the table. And I've also watched some of the meetings, and two ways. I think I'm thinking both about who's at the table in city council and the ways that I think, like, even just the way my body language, the way my eye contact, the way that we engage as humans, sometimes is different when, if I'm looking at you and I'm talking, it's just gonna land differently than if I'm looking over there and talking about something. And so just from like a human perspective, as me coming to the table, that is my approach. And I hope that you'll call me out if one day you're like, hey, and even with our public forum, like, I want to make sure it's already, I'm like, people who come to public forum are brave to come. And I want to make sure that we create more of an environment where more individuals feel comfortable to come and speak, because we need to hear the voices. And so how can I, as an individual at the table, create that environment for those individuals? So that's my personal approach. I think systemically, there are other things that can be done. And I am having initial conversations about, are there ways that there can be structural rules and policies set in place of how we treat each other. And I don't have clear solutions yet, but just know that I am thinking about like structurally, if there are ways that we can make some changes.
Thank you.
Chris? So I'm looking at the fiscal year 2026 fair market rents as developed by Housing and Urban Development here. And a 1-bedroom apartment in Burlington is $1,651 per month. So multiplying that times 12, it comes out to about 19,800, a few extra dollars. We'll call it 20,000 to make the math easier. Now, my understanding from our friends in the affordable housing community is that in order for housing to be considered classified as affordable, it needs to be, I think, 1/3 or no more than 1/3 of a person's take-home pay. So if you're paying $20,000 for a 1-bedroom and you do the math, it was 1/3, you have to triple that. So that means that person's take-home pay has to be about $60,000, which means that their gross pay is probably like, it's going to be more than that, before the taxes come out. And the challenge I see is when I talk to the working people in this community, I talk to our bartenders, our cooks, our servers, our security personnel, our retail associates, pretty much anybody who works for an hourly wage and rents. I don't know anybody who makes that kind of money. Even the bartenders that work at some of the nicer establishments where they have great clientele and they can get a premium for their drinks. It's a challenge for them. And I've talked to people who are still living, with former partners because neither one of them can find a place to get out and on their own to move on. And they're in toxic situations. I talked to our young people, and much to my surprise, a number of them actually are working and paying for their own apartments while they are in school at the university. And it's not just the parents, as I think a lot of people kind of assume sometimes. And I asked them, what's going on? And they said, oh, well, we have to live, 4, 5, 6 people to a building because that's how many we have to make the math work. And I look back at our city and I see that we have somewhere, depending on the math, and I don't know, maybe Councilor Grant, you could jump in here, what the latest is, but I think the last statistic I heard is somewhere between 60 and 70% of our people that live in Burlington are renters. And the issue here is really affordability. And while I certainly recognize that the just cause eviction and the changes to the notice period will certainly be beneficial in long term, I kind of feel like that's really dancing around the issue here. And when I look back over the last 25, 30 years, I kind of feel like what we're seeing now are the fruits of the policies from prior administrations. And when you walk through town, you walk over places like Buell Street, Bradley Street, Green Street, Isham Street, Loomis Street, all those, you walk through there and you look at the buildings, you can tell these were once single family homes that had been cut up. And I think that there was a thought, I think back in the 80s, it's like, hey, we have a housing crunch. We need to get more units on the market as quickly as possible. How can we best do that? well, we have these older Victorian homes that are not, they're kind of empty nesters and they have the capacity. Maybe if we converted them into apartments, we can very quickly bring that in and provide homes for working people. And I think that probably worked initially until the housing providers figured out that, I have college kids in the town. I live in a college town and I can charge a premium for that. And as Susie points out, some of the folks that have these converted units, when people move out, they just raise the rent. They don't reinvest in the property. They're not putting anything into cyclical. Now I happen to rent from one of the larger landlords in town. And I've been fortunate that I have not, seen a rent increase in quite some time. And my experience has been is typically like when the unit turns over, that's when the rent increase kicks in. But some of these neighborhoods where this going, they have college kids. So they're turning over every year. And it's my experience is what I've seen is it's like, okay, well, if it's $1,600 a month now, we'll just kick it up to 17 for the next year. And it keeps going on and then when the taxes go up, those get passed on. You have a university that wants to bring in more and more students from out of state because they're not getting the support they need from the legislature. It's just like, we have a situation where demand is far outstripping supply and it's become difficult to do this. And I think as Charlie mentioned, we're talking about building affordable housing. I think we really need to kind of shift the focus to rehabbing, but also that we talk about homelessness or people that are living on house, we kind of wait till they're out on the street and then we try to fix the problem. We put them back in housing. And that's a really costly way to do it, both not only in terms of actual, getting them into housing, but in terms of the human cost of someone actually living on the street. So I kind of feel like maybe we ought to be reorienting our approach to houselessness to be focusing on trying to help people keep the housing that they already had. And I don't really see a lot of programs out there to help people. And maybe there's, a program that could be put in place that says, we can give you some additional help up to a percentage of, your rent for a period of time. Obviously, we don't want to create a situation where people just kind of live off the system, but if they're a few $100 short for the rent, and we can help them out for a month or two or whatever, that may be, a possible solution. So I don't know if there's risk in a question, but this is just kind of my observations as a long-term renter of 25 plus years. It's really a complicated situation. And I think at the end of the day, it's really more about the affordability and how do we make it affordable. And I don't know that, we talk about rent stabilization. My understanding is there have to be some changes in state law to make that happen. And the only thing I could really think of is, well, you could always pull the certificate of occupancy and then they can't rent and then they have no income, which, okay, well, that puts pressure on them. But then you've got people that have nowhere to live too. So it's kind of like, how do you deal with this? So I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on just general purpose, not really, like I said, it's a complex issue and there's a lot of moving parts and it's kind of hard to grasp, but I'm just curious what your perspective on some of these issues are.
I'll try to keep it short, and Mila, I think you're gonna have some thoughts on this. It made me think of your cycle and the way that we're so interconnected just as a community, like and thinking of our employer, like big employers, but even sort of smaller ones across our city. One area of work that I've been doing with the Burlington School District is through their HR department. They're trying to retain more of their educators. And the reason I'll give this as an example is because how I'm approaching that work is how do we ensure that if we bring in someone to the school district that they're able to then have enough to like their pay is high enough so that they can stay in this in the city as well. And so, if we think of like this sort of cycle, like how do we pinpoint maybe a few areas of where we can, whether it's collaborations that Mayor mentioned, sort of like those agreements with UVM, maybe part of those agreements is, or I know there's already been a resolution around how do we make sure that students stay in as much as possible in UVM housing, and then let's find another pinpoint, and then let's find another one. Like let's make sure the people are earning what they deserve. Let's make sure that landlords are not increasing the rent year to year. And so, even just with the group here, I can already think about like, do we as a group here want to identify a few areas and prioritize that for like 2 years?
And I just want to point out that number I gave you, the 1,651, that's the 40th percentile. So that means 60% of the rents are more than that.
Yes, I was about to say that is really low. Like when we look at, especially the newer units that are coming online, those prices are crazy. And I do see them doing a lot of digital advertising right now. So it makes me think maybe these units aren't moving the way they thought they were going to move.
Actually, to parody off of that, I'm seeing that like there's this one developer landlord that is offering $500 off first month's rent.
Yeah, and I'm like, that doesn't matter. Yeah.
No,
Yeah, we're seeing the same ads. Yeah, there's a lot of digital advertising going on right now to try to move these units, but these prices for even just like studios, it's not manageable. I guess what I would say in a nutshell is for all these issues that the city is facing at this time, there is no one silver bullet. It is going to be requiring, Mayor Mulvaney Stanek always likes to say, diversifying the tools in the toolbox. There is going to need to be a number of items that are being pursued at the same time. The MOU with UVM is extremely important, and I have been vocal about the need to take into consideration the amount of their enrollment. Their previous negotiators did not understand what was happening in our market because they didn't live here. And sometimes they would say things to try to make us think that they understood, and then they would say something else that would contradict and show that they didn't have an understanding. Then they were playing games around graduate students. UVM had the goal and has reached the goal of being the top tier research university. And in order to make that and keep that, you've got to bring in more graduate students. So those numbers have to be included as well. And so the MOU is going to be part of it. And I think we passed neighborhood code right before Mayor Mulvaney Stanek took office. So now it's how do we continue where we're really activating more projects under this new code. We did get a report that showed, hey, these are the type of projects that have been permitted that prior to the update would not have been allowed. Well, how do we get more of those projects in the pipeline? The press conference that the mayor was talking about that occurred on Monday showed a big influx of funds to help get that South End project going, which will be important. But how do we get more of those funds? How do we encourage people to develop in a way that previously they had not been able to do? I had a lot of issues with former Mayor Weinberger. We all know that, especially around community safety. But his goal of pushing through changes in neighborhood code, that was something that the city needed to do. We were really out of date when we look at the needs that we have in order to build and expand. And people, we do have a lot of NIMBYism. We should have residential medium across the entire city, but we don't, because certain people don't want, they don't want buildings in their neighborhoods. Oh, we don't want to have taller buildings. We don't know who will be in them, and they'll be looking at us. I mean, I'm stunned by some of the comments that were made, just stunned. It's like, yeah, you would have more neighbors, but the practicality too, I think. So we have to talk about that NIMBYism in a real way in order to help us. I want to say regarding GMT, everybody needs to be phone call, email to your state representatives, phone call, email to the governor. We already had significant cuts on GMT, and now to have even more cuts on GMT, that's not accessible. And UVM wants what they're funding, they want that bus to be going up into off Dorset Street and that whole new development, because that's where they've built more housing. We want that number 11 back. And so it's kind of shocking we lost that bus because UVM had been helping to fund it. And now they're like, okay, we're going to still fund a bus, but we don't want to fund that one. We want to fund something else. And we've had this gaping hole that's left. And I want you to know, Charlie, I think about that number 11 bus all the time. But we have to be doing things. We can't just kind of keep voting down all these suggestions. We have to see what we can do to move forward because there's other things that will be coming in. And I feel we are hitting roadblocks. Like I really felt very strongly that we should have had the tax fairness item. It was a non-binding item. It would have generated conversations within the community and the people of Burlington would have been able to vote on what they thought was the idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grant again. Now, do we have any other questions from one more question from the audience for Laura Sanchez?
Comment on the school district. You know, sometimes I travel and I go to like kind of tourist towns and I talk to the working people who work there, you know, bartender service and like, oh yeah, I don't know, I can't afford to live here. I live like half hour, 40 minutes away and have to drive into work because that's what it affords. And that's kind of, I think, what Burlington's becoming. People that work here have to live outside of the city and maybe come down. I know people that live up in St. Albans because it's a little bit more affordable, but Vail, Colorado, they had an issue with their training and acting professional teachers. And I'm hearing that the university, the medical center is having trouble recruiting because they can't find affordable housing for the people that they're trying to bring here. And I think the school district of Vail, from what I understand, they actually got into the real estate business. They actually purchased some buildings and said, okay, you're going to teach, we're going to give you housing. It's part of your you know, your compensation. So
is it UVM that's, I mean, if the student, would we agree that the students are the ones driving up the housing costs or no?
part of it, but an interesting thing is when I talk to the students, they actually support a cap on enrollment because none of them want to be in a lecture hall with 250 other students. They want to have a good quality education, and the more people they bring in, has an impact there. I had another thought, it escaped me. We'll save it for another time.
They also want to be in quality housing. I mean, once they get here, they build community. But they're living in spaces, like on one of the dorms, they took one of the lounges and converted it to a quad. So they took a space that wasn't meant to be like a where you sleep at night, right? There was issues around the number of electrical outlets and other things, and then they took away a common space. Their mold issues are attributed to the fact that they have more bodies in these buildings than were originally intended. So you've got more people taking showers, especially in the older buildings where they don't have the ventilation to prevent the moisture from building. You see them with doors being left open and signs, don't close the door or the moisture will build up. But we're talking mold, not only in the ceilings, but down on the walls. And they had a contest on Instagram. They called it Housing Hell, something like that. And students had to submit pictures. And there was literally this wall that was just black with mold and a mushroom growing on it.
Happened to me like 20 years ago.
And there's mushrooms, there's infestation, silverfish. So when we look at these older dorms where they're putting freshmen and sophomores, they don't want to be on campus if they can't be guaranteed better housing, because they do have newer buildings that don't have these issues, but they're not maintaining the older buildings. So I want to be able to say, UVM, I want to vote. I want myself and my fellow counselors to vote to change code so you can build more in Trinity campus. That's not going to help if you don't fix what you already have, because students don't want to be there. So that's part of it too. I will say that UVM's been really responsive in terms of now deep diving the issues about how those maintenance tickets were reported, how they were responded or not responded to. And I do appreciate that.
To end this piece, Laura, do you have a closing statement for everything that you have heard from us tonight?
Well, I just want to say thank you for spending the time together. This was really energizing, and I'm very much looking forward to representing you all, to representing our community, and to being in community with you all. Thank you.
And we have one last piece. We have public forum. And that should end our night. Do we have anybody? Someone in the back who wants to come speak? Right. Where should I get the minutes? Come on up right here. Okay.
Never mind.
Good evening. Thanks for all of you for being here. My name is Nikhil Goyal. I just wanted to introduce myself very briefly. I'm a sociologist at the University of Vermont. I'm running for state senate in Chittenden Central. You'll be hearing from me over the next couple of months, but just wanted to share a little bit of my background and what I'm planning to run on. I'm a sociology professor focused on education, poverty, incarceration. I worked for Senator Sanders as a senior policy advisor on education and children on 2 Senate committees, on the Senate Budget Committee and the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, focusing on education, childcare, the child tax credit, and other programs. Helped start a program in Vermont that provides tuition-free community college for incarcerated students and correctional staff in our state prisons. So very involved in making sure that we address public safety both in and outside our correctional facilities. I'm really focused in this campaign on making Vermont more affordable. Working people are being priced out of our state. That is the underlying fundamental crisis that we're all facing here. I live right here in Burlington, right in Ward 3, and I see it every day. Folks who are dealing with homelessness, with housing insecurity, with addiction, being priced out of their homes, not being able to afford their health care, their energy bills, their rent, their mortgages, the list goes on and on. My agenda is squarely focused on addressing some of those major cost drivers. Keeping public dollars in public schools. We've had millions of dollars siphoned off from the public system in this state and go to private and religious schools. That's money that should be brought into the public system. The second is the biggest cost driver of school budgets is healthcare. We've got to invest in universal primary care because we know that hospital spending is a big driver of overall healthcare costs, and too many people are using the emergency room to access basic care. If we had a functioning and well thought out primary care system, then we would reduce emergency room admissions. We would allow more people to get access to a doctor before their illnesses become chronic and more severe, and we would improve health outcomes over time. So there's a number of policies I'll be talking about on the campaign trail, but happy to chat, and we'll be door knocking and continue to door knock over the coming months.
Say your name again and what you're running.
Nikhil Goyal, running for state senate in Chittenden Central.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Do we have any other comments for public forum? Actually, yep.
Hi, everybody. My name is Fareed. I am actually here on behalf of Proposition Zero. It is an electoral campaign that is aiming to bring direct democracy to Burlington. We have a charter amendment that we are hoping to be put on the November ballot. For that, we need about 2,000 signatures. Often the town meeting day and also the primary election is the time to get signatures. That's what we found out in the past. So I'm also inviting anyone who's interested in bringing direct democracy to Burlington to come talk to me and to sign up for a 2-hour shift in the upcoming town meeting day. Just really quick about the amendment. We basically want Burlington to have what all the other towns and cities in Vermont already have, which is the ability for regular people to put proposals on the ballot. We are the only city in Vermont that doesn't allow that to the voters. Like Winooski let their residents not only propose ordinance, but also to repeal an existing one based on majority vote. So that's what we are trying to bring to Burlington, which is like this Vermont, kind of like Vermont town hall democracy way of grassroots decision making and meaningful participation for each one of us. So I have a piece of paper and the petition that's going around. You can find out more about, you can find the exact language that we're proposing in there. And I would also ask for your support and your signature. It's been going around here. So thank you very much.
Thank you for it. And the petition in question is right here. I'm pretty sure you can find it on one of the tables after the meeting.
Sign-in sheet.
Sign-in sheet.
Everybody sign the sign-in sheet.
All right. Any other deal?
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that last Thursday, we had a public safety committee meeting, ran about, it was a little bit over 2 hours, but it's extremely interesting. We had full presentations from our fire department, including Battalion Chief McCombie, who oversees the EMS department. Full data that was really taking a look at what's been happening in the last year. Even if you don't have time to watch the meeting, their reports, their PowerPoints that accompany their presentations are very, very interesting. So it gives you an idea of what they're dealing with, but also the way they are looking at data differently in order to understand how our community response system is being used. I found it to be really engaging. And then at our meeting that will be, I believe it's Thursday, February 26th, we're going to have Sarah George, and she'll be talking about the accountability court as well as some other data coming through the court system. Thank you.
When is the meeting with Councilor George?
It's the last Thursday, I believe it's February 26th.
Yeah, any other comments?
Me,
Charlie?
sorry. I'm wondering. How they now call it the UVM Medical Center. Used to be Fletcher Allen. Now it's UVM Medical Center. How much is UVM the medical center? The medical center should sort of work. If UVM isn't willing to make buses that go out to Tilly Drive, how can they say it's open to the public? It's where there they are teaching their people how to be doctors, and they need a lot more. There is one foot doctor in the entire area, and it's 6 months down the road if you want an appointment. And it may even be, we're not taking new people now, but how much is UVM? How much is UVM attached to the college? The college seems to be doing fine. You get $95,000 from somebody and then put them in a hole with mold all over it. That doesn't seem very healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. And one last comment before we end the night.
I just wanted to follow up on, I think there was the comments of Sir Ruben earlier, from the brand list, and I think you'd asked, well, how do we do that? I think one way that we can do that is to look at bringing in a modern arena here to Burlington or a convention center. Now, I've always been a fan of the arena approach, but recently I've had some conversations with folks who've convinced me that convention center may be a better fit for Burlington. And I know that the chamber did a study that was released back in, I think, November, and they estimated that we're leaving something like $63 million. And I don't know if it was tax revenue or whatnot on the table that we're not getting. So I think economic development needs to be at the forefront of some of our conversations. We need to grow the tax list. We need to generate sales tax revenue, and we can't keep framing things in binary terms in terms of property tax or income tax. There's a third option. It's called the sales tax, and we need to start looking at how to make that happen. Last but not least, it is February. It is Black History Month. So I just wanted to call out, as many of you know, I'm an avid hockey fan. I just wanted to mention that the Olympics are coming up, and we have Layla Edwards from the University of Wisconsin, or formerly of the University of Wisconsin, playing on the team. She's the first woman of color to play on the U.S. women's national team, and she will be representing us over in Italy. So very happy to see that, because hockey is for everyone. And last but not least, tomorrow night, the University of Vermont women will be hosting the Boston University Terriers. Brooks and I had the good fortune to run into some of the Terriers as we were picking up our flatbread tonight. But I mentioned it because tomorrow's one of my favorite games of the year. It's the rally against cancer. So if you have been touched by cancer, or anyone in friends or family that has that, please come out and support it. We're trying to pack the gut and break the attendance record, which I think is somewhere around 2,700 people. Tickets are $500 No, $5. Wow, where did that come from? $5 per person, and puck drops at 6 o'clock. So if we can get out and support the women and support those who are fighting the good fight against cancer, I'd love to see you there at the game. So thank you.
Great, Chris, thanks. Good, thank you.
Thank you.
And at 8:42, oh yeah, motion to adjourn the meeting at 8:42 PM. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Good night.